Imagine your phone has an uplink packet ready to send, maybe a message, a location update, or the first request from an app. But at that exact moment, the active radio connection is gone. The S1 bearer has been released. The S1 signaling connection has been released. Even the S11 GTPC connection is released. So, where exactly can that packet go? The tempting answer is start over with a brand new registration. But that misses the important clue. The network has not necessarily forgotten the device. The phone can still have registered context even while the temporary roads used by active traffic have been taken down. The problem is not proving that the traveler exists from the beginning. The problem is reopening a safe route quickly enough for the waiting packet. This is a service request started by the user equipment, or UE. The UE asks the network to resume service because it has traffic to send. We will follow one request through three layers. First, the radio access must be reopened. Then the core network must identify the right context and protect the exchange. Finally, the missing bearers must be rebuilt so packets can reach the internet again. Here is the misconception to leave behind. Released resources do not mean a vanished subscriber. They mean the network has separated long-lived identity from short-lived transport. The whole procedure is a controlled reopening, not a mysterious restart. By the end, you should be able to point to the moment when a packet becomes a protected, connected data path. Before any message is sent, freeze the starting picture. On the left is the UE, farther right are the ENB, the MME, the serving gateway, and the packet data network gateway. The source diagram makes the released condition explicit. S1 bearer released, S1 signaling connection released, and S11 GTPC connection released. These labels describe different pieces of the same pause. The S1 bearer is the user data path between the radio side and the serving gateway. The S1 signaling connection is the control relationship used to coordinate that path. S11 GTPC is a control connection between the MME and the serving gateway, used to manage tunnel and bearer state. None of those labels says that the UE has become unknown. They say that active connection machinery has been released. This distinction matters because a full attach would solve a larger problem than the one we actually have. A fresh attach would establish registered identity and service from scratch. Here, the network can work from context that already exists, then restore only what has gone quiet. In our road metaphor, the address book and permit remain available, but the temporary lanes are closed. The phone now has uplink data to be sent. That single fact triggers a request to resume service. Notice what is not happening yet. There is no internet packet flowing, no active S1 bearer, and no assumption that the radio is already connected. The recovery must begin at the edge of the network, where the UE can ask for a radio connection. So the baseline is simple. Context may remain, transport has been released, and data is waiting. Once you can see those three facts separately, every later message has a job rather than looking like a list to memorize. The first obstacle is local. Before the core network can restore anything, the UE needs a radio side control connection to the ENB. Watch the road nearest the phone rebuild in three moves. First, the UE sends an RRC connection request. RRC means Radio Resource Control, the signaling layer that negotiates the radio connection. The request is not the data packet itself. It is a knock on the radio door. Next, the ENB answers with RRC connection setup. That response creates the control structure the UE needs in order to speak more completely. Now comes the subtle step. The UE sends RRC connection setup complete, and this message carries a NAS service request. NAS is the signaling language used between the UE and the core mobility function, even though the message is physically carried across the radio and then through the ENB. In other words, the phone first creates a local speaking path, then uses that path to ask the core network for service. This is why RRC setup alone is not internet service. It opens the first gate, it does not restore the end-to-end bearer. The three-message exchange is like a short access checkpoint: request, setup, completion. Only after the final step can the deeper request travel inward. Picture the layers as nested roads. RRC builds the short road from UE to ENB. The NAS service request is the traveler that will continue beyond that road. The useful insight is not merely the order of three names. It is the dependency. No radio control path, no way to deliver the service request, no reason for the core to rebuild the data path. The phone has now earned access to ask for recovery, but it has not yet earned recovered traffic. The service request now reaches the ENB, but the ENB is not the final decision maker for restoring core network contexts. Its job is to carry the request inward. It does that with an initial UE message sent from the ENB to the MME. The word initial can be misleading. It does not mean the device is registering for the first time. It means this is the ENB's initial message for this newly reestablished signaling exchange. Look at what travels with it. The message includes an ENB UE S1 APID, which lets the ENB refer to this UE on the S1 control interface. It includes the tracking area identity, or TAI, giving the network location context. It includes the E-UTRAN cell global identifier, identifying the serving radio cell, and it includes the RRC establishment cause, a reason associated with why the radio connection was created. These fields are not decorative labels. They help the MME place the request in the right conversation and interpret the circumstances of the access. Notice the direction carefully. UE to ENB, then ENB to MME. The UE is not drawn as a direct client of every core node. The ENB is the radio side messenger and the MME is the control side decision point. This is a layered design. Each layer contributes the information it knows best. The UE knows that it needs service. The ENB knows how the radio connection was established and where it is. The MME knows how to coordinate mobility, security, and context recovery. The road has reached the first central checkpoint, and the request has arrived with enough context to be located rather than guessed at. The next question is stricter. Before the network reopens a route, can it trust the traveler and protect the conversation? At the MME, the request meets a security checkpoint. Why spend time on authentication if the device may already have registered context? Because resuming service still creates a live path for user traffic. The network must establish that the request belongs to the right subscriber and that later signaling and data are protected. The exchange begins with authentication information request and authentication information answer. The MME asks the home subscriber side for the information needed to authenticate, and the answer supplies the material for the challenge. The MME then sends authentication request to the UE. The UE returns authentication response. Think of this as checking a permit against the authority that issued it, then asking the traveler to prove possession of the matching credential. The procedure does not stop at identity. Next comes security mode command from the MME and security mode complete from the UE. This is where the security mode is established for the signaling relationship. The source diagram also shows the kind of information that makes this concrete. Security capabilities and NAS security parameters are carried as part of the setup logic. They tell the network what protection the UE supports and help both sides agree on how to protect the control exchange. A common misconception is to treat these messages as overhead between the interesting steps. They are the reason the interesting steps can be trusted. Without authentication, the network would not have a verified basis for restoring service. Without security mode completion, signaling could be exposed or ambiguous, precisely when bearer state is being rebuilt. In the road metaphor, the checkpoint does not carry traffic. It verifies the traveler and locks the control channel. Only then does the MME authorize the next transformation, turning an abstract request into a concrete radio and core context. The road is still closed for packets, but now the reopening can proceed under protection. Security answers the question, may this recovery proceed? The next message answers, what exactly must be rebuilt? The MME sends an initial context setup request to the ENB. Let us read it as a design specification rather than a label. First is the message type. This is a request to create the access context needed for resumed service. Then comes ERAB to be set up. An ERAB is an E-UTRAN radio access bearer, the logical lane that will carry user traffic through the radio network. The request therefore does not merely say connect the phone. It identifies bearer work that the ENB must perform. The request also carries UE security capability and UE network capability. These fields describe what the device can support, so the network can restore a compatible protected context instead of assuming capabilities that may not exist. Finally, NAS security parameters help tie the request to the secured NAS exchange that has just completed. Watch the dependency grow. Authentication established confidence in identity. Security mode command and complete established protected control. Initial context setup now converts that protected decision into concrete radio side resources. This is the moment where a service request becomes an engineering plan. The ENB receives the plan, prepares the radio and S1 side context, and later returns initial context setup response. The response matters because it is evidence that the requested context was actually established, not merely requested. One easy mistake is to imagine that the MME directly opens the radio lane. It does not. The MME coordinates the decision and specifies the context. The ENB owns the radio resources and reports the result. In the road metaphor, the central checkpoint sends a construction order to the local road crew. The order names the lanes, the safety rules, and the capabilities to respect. Only when the crew builds those lanes and reports back can traffic be released toward the gateways. Now the recovery becomes visible as transport. The ENB restores the radio side and the S1 bearer, then returns initial context setup response to the MME. This response closes the loop between a requested context and an established one. But an S1 lane alone is not the entire journey to the internet. The path continues through the Serving Gateway, SGW, and the Packet Data Network Gateway, PGW. Keep the interfaces separate. S1 is the bearer path on the access side. S5 is the bearer path between SGW and PGW, carrying downlink and uplink traffic through the core. S11 is a GTPC control connection between MME and SGW. It manages context rather than serving as the ordinary user data road. The diagram shows the restored S1 bearer and S5 bearer with downlink and uplink directions, leading onward to the internet. It also shows a modify bearer request and modify bearer response. These messages let the serving gateway update or complete the user plane details now that the radio side endpoint is available again. Where indicated, the packet core may also perform IP CAN session modification, with the source showing the optional CC and CCA exchange. The exact names matter because they mark different responsibilities, but the causal story is the key. First, the UE asks, then the network identifies and protects the request. Then the ENB builds the access lane. Finally, the gateways align the core tunnel with that lane. Watch the packet cross the finished road. UE to ENB, across S1 to SGW, across S5 to PGW, and out toward the internet. The UE, ENB, and MME can now occupy connected states. RRC connected on the radio side, ECM connected for the signaling connection, with the UE's EMM registered context retained. Service has not returned because one magic message said go. It returned because signaling and bearer construction converged into one continuous path.